Hello and welcome everybody to our first guest speaker in the Conscious Awakening of Humanity. We are a collective where we focus on high vibrational information to help awaken not only ourselves, but the rest of humanity. And today we have with us Barbara Belger, an amazing lady. I've known Barbara for quite some time. And I've personally trained with Barbara as well and got a lot out of that I still use in everyday life. Now, Barbara's going to be talking to us about the 5 biological natural laws. She brings a unique global perspective to her work, having lived across Germany, France, Japan, Thailand, China, and now New Zealand. Barbara was originally a translator and interpreter, and she retrained as a coach in her 40s and now blends science with spirituality in her solution-focused approach. In this, I know it's going to be a brilliant presentation that we're going to have from Barbara, and I know you're going to learn a lot. You're going to have a few aha moments. She's going to introduce the 5 biological natural laws, an eye-opening framework rooted in Dr. Hamer's work and Meta Health that proposes a radically different understanding of disease, viewing it as a meaningful biological response rather than a malfunction. It reveals the precise emotional and biological roots of illness that empowers individuals to activate true healing from within. And I sum that up basically when I talk to my clients about that, saying it turns the medical model on its head. So I will put that over to you, Barbara, to start our presentation, which I believe you'll go through the presentation and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So welcome, Barbara. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Fabulous. Really, really nice to see you, Debbie, and see everybody here. Thanks for the intro. That was great. You've already said it all. So yes, I will share my screen in a moment and hope to just turn some paradigms upside down. And above all, my intention would be to take away. Let me just turn my volume. To take away people's fear of disease. And before I forget, Andy, the music was fantastic. It was just wonderful. Thanks for starting it like that. Right, let me try and share my screen here. Okay, so we're talking about the 5 biological natural laws of new medicine, or as Dr. Hamer at some point registered it as German new medicine, simply because he discovered it while he was living in Germany. I'm going to briefly introduce Dr. Hamer, who's now passed away. He's got a couple of doctor titles, studied also theology, ran a cancer treatment center very successfully with very high success rates. And if you Google search his name, I haven't tried to do that for a while, it comes up as charlatan and the worst possible names he can be given. Because of his work being quite closed, and he closed it himself, a lot of, I call it offsprings, happened. So, for example, meta-medicine, later called meta-health, or there's a group now developing, they solely call themselves the 5 BN, biological natural laws. A group in France, psychogenealogy, I think they're called. And the original founders of German New Medicine are quite up in arms about it. So it's a little bit of a conflict And for myself, I just take the best of all worlds, and because it is too important not to share this this work. I at the end of the presentation, I'll show you a couple of references and sources or resources that I find useful. One of them, a website in Canada, which doesn't make much sense without knowing the basics, which we're going to talk into. So Dr. Hammer discovered he presented with testicular cancer shortly after his son was shot and subsequently died. And having been a doctor for a very long time, and his wife as well, he just found the relation between the accident or the death of his son and his own disease quite surprising. And that then, because he was working in a cancer clinic in Munich at the time, he started to ask people questions, and found that actually all 200 people he asked had some sort of event that happened before in correlation to the symptoms appearing. So let's just get into the first biological law. This is my program that I'm at the moment rolling out. That's the art of living well, with everything that I've been doing for 20 odd years. Everything from birth to death, and the 5 biological natural laws are a part of it, of course. When I met Debbie, I was running a couple of trainings up and down New Zealand, and these were some of the feedbacks that we got at the time, that it was incredibly interesting and effective. Somebody said at some point the light came on. The 2 phases of healing, which impressed some confidence in personal stress, and so on. So thank you again for the feedback back then. Most of the people will have heard or read Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. Another one touching on metaphysical correlation is Everett Rose and her book, very large book, very big book on metaphysical anatomy. Both fantastic resources, and I'm very grateful that they give people an initiative to actually make the body-mind-emotion connection. If you want the real science behind it, I always recommend to look into Dr. Hammer's work, actually. So let's start right in. So the first biological law is that every disease starts with, in the German New Medicine world, they call it the significant event. The acronym that works better for me is UDIN moment, which stands for unexpected and dramatic, isolating or isolative, and you have no strategies to deal with. And of course, it's unexpected and highly dramatic. And we'll get into some examples later. Now, what is very important at this point is to note that the impact happened, or the symptoms happen simultaneously in your psyche, in your brain, and in the relevant organ, depending on how you perceive the unexpected dramatic event, whether, on what level you perceive it, and we'll get into that in a second. And then, depending on how you perceive, on what level you perceive the shock event, let's say, it either leads to an increase in functionality or in a decrease of functionality. And another factor that is important in that is also the handedness. So if you could just, while I'm still talking, just maybe see when you clap your hands whether the left side is on top, like it is in my case, or whether the right side is on top. That will then explain, yeah, which side, which organ reaction will happen, and what impact it has. So whether that is a mother-child conflict or whether that is your internal world, your feminine side, your baby, your baby can also be your business, of course, or whether it is on your male side, the outside world, father, partner, again, job, if you consider it as something, of prestige. And so the handedness is quite important, and just take a little note. We maybe can get into that later. And then these are a couple of examples of, you can even tell from the people's look on their face what they all have in common, that they stop breathing or they hold the breath. And if you recall any shocking moment yourself, then that's the first thing. Sometimes you cover your mouth because you're speechless, but the breath is always the first thing that stays, and then the eyes, and the top left guy there with the hands on his head, which is obviously an intellectual conflict that he's experiencing. Somebody that, the top bottom right, he's reading some horrific news, obviously, and then the two ladies whispering something that obviously very much surprises the lady. Now, depending on how they impacted, let's just say the whisper there is I just noticed, I saw the other day, I saw your husband and he was actually having an affair. Now, depending on how you perceive this, you'll have a different reaction to it. If you perceive it that, why is he in bed with somebody else and not with me? Am I not good enough? That will show up in a certain way. If you think that you are not young anymore, or not young enough, and there is a rivalry going on, that will have an impact on a different area. If your marriage in your view has ended anyway, you're probably quite happy, and there will not be any reaction of any kind, because win-win for everybody. So that is quite important to know, and we'll get to play a little bit with the different ways that impacts later. So that was in brief the first biological law. The second is that every disease goes in two phases. And to me, for a beginner, I would wish people to remember this most of all. So in some textbook, it says we have 400 warm diseases and 400 cold diseases, which means depending on the germ layer, brain layer, you either have symptoms in the first phase or symptoms in the second phase, which is the warm phase. And that's where it gets really, really interesting and mind-boggling, I think. So there you see, I can't point here, I don't have a pointer. You see the what they call the DHS, that is the Dirk-Hammer syndrome. So that is our Uden moment. So the unexpected dramatic event happened, which you perceive isolative. So you're by yourself, you can't share, or you don't want to share, and at that point you don't have any strategies to deal with. And what happens then? You go into a conflict active phase, which is the stress phase. I just called it the stress phase or the cold phase. So your temperature reduces. It is constant thinking. sleepless nights, loss of appetite, and literally ruminating. Can't get it out of my mind. And so that is your cold phase of the disease. And then comes a reversal of the disease process, of the process. Let's say you call a friend and say, "Can't believe what just happened to me," and or you get an understanding of what is going on, or you come to terms with it, or whichever way, whether that is a healing moment or just one of the factors, the unexpected, dramatic, isolating, no strategies factors gets changed into resolve, let's say, and then you come into the warm phase of the disease process. So usually people say, "I'm just really quite tired now. I need to sleep." The temperature goes up a little bit, and appetite returns, and right spot on in the middle here, you see what they call the epileptic crisis, or I just call it the healing crisis. And a lot of healing modalities, know about the healing crisis. In our work here, I want to stress it even more than in other modalities, because some of the healing crises can be quite dramatic. But in the purpose of our presentation tonight, I'm just pointing it out that what happens in the healing crisis, again, is a useful, evolutionary, meaningful process, because your body, mind, psyche system tests whether or not you really have understood what you are to learn and how you have to evolve here. And if that's a yes, then you go through the second half of the warm healing phase and then return to health in an evolutionary, better, evolved you. Let's just call it that. Notable is also that the healing crisis is spot on in the middle. So if you've got if your cold phase of the disease, let's say, lasts one day, 24 hours, then you get into the healing phase. The total healing phase, the warm phase, is also 24 hours. And right in the center, in the middle of that healing phase, so that's the 12-hour mark, is where you have a healing crisis, where maybe you have a spike in fever, or where you have most of the pain in case of a broken bone or bone repair, joint repair, or and then again, when you know that, oh, this is now my healing crisis, it probably lasts maybe an hour, 2 hours, and then you just relax into the process. You return to health, and everything is okay. So yeah, again, I just find this the most. I think I've got a bigger slide of the healing crisis, just to help people really, really memorize this image. Not knowing about the two phases can lead to a series of misconceptions, I think. In the case, for example, of skin issues, let's call it eczema or neurodermitis, whichever you want to call it. In the organ is your dermis, your outer layer of skin. A little bit of the subdermis also. And the conflict, I'm just going to go a little bit in an example. The conflict is here a separation, a loss of touch. And an example would be, for example, a child has a first sleepover at grandparents or whatever, and is a little bit restless, feels restless, again, goes into cold phase. A small child can't explain what is going on. goes into the cold phase, and the skin goes into a cell minus, which means it thins a little bit so the child doesn't experience the conflict of separation or the conflict of loss of touch from the parents as much. And then when the child returns to the parents, conflict is resolved. And then is where, in the warm phase, where we have symptoms, where the skin gets, if you want, refilled, filled up what has been thinned. And that's where you have symptoms that we then call eczema or neurodermatitis or whatever way you call it. It's pretty much all of the same, actually. And then what, of course, in the today's medical model, what happens? First of all, we get worried about the symptoms, about the skin rash, and the following temperature. Also, the skin feels warmer. And the standard medical approach, if you then go to a doctor, is hydrocortisone or some steroids, which then puts the skin into the conflict phase. So it actually goes back into the stress phase, and that's where the symptoms disappear. But of course, the root is still there, and if you're not getting to the root of it, it can lead to a chronicity of dermatitis or eczema. And yeah, so that is, I think, is always the best example of how we can misinterpret if we don't have this model in our mind and really deep ingrained almost. So let me move on to the third biological law. So the third biological law really is mainly embryology. So in the first couple of weeks, your embryo has determined which organ connects to which brain layer. So you have your inner germ layer, your endoderm, you have your mesoderm, and you have your ectoderm. And then the organs, and I think I've got another brochure, I've another write-up that I can open later in our Q&A maybe. So every organ has a specific point of connection to the germ layers, and that is really quite important. And also in the brain, which Dr. Hammer mapped out perfectly in a fantastic scientific way, even with the use of CT scans. In each brain layer, you see exactly the point which correspond to the organ and the germ layer. And then it's an exact description of actually what is going on with your disease process. So what did I say here? Endoderm, mesoderm, ectoderm. So let's just have a look. So these are the germ layers. So you have your oldest part of the brain corresponding to the endoderm. And the oldest part of the brain, the organs related to it are the part of the brain is your brain stem or your inner brain. And the organs related to it are survival organs. So eating, releasing, and part of the basic reproduction, let's just say. Those are your organs. In the second layer there from the top, the orange layer that you see here is your mesoderm. So the organs related to that, I always consider or try and recall it as your protective, like an armadillo, your protective organs. So your pericardium protects your heart. The again, part of your skin, second layer of your skin. All those are protective parts, and so the organs are in that area. And then you get into the new mesoderm, they call it here, and 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 that's your skeletal function. So your bones, joints, blood, and the story that goes on with the organs related to that is value, self value, how you perceive yourself, to yourself and also to the outer world. And then the newest part of the brain is our cerebral cortex, and and in the embryology is we talk about the connection to the ectoderm. And so the story, the way I always try and recall it, and don't worry if you don't recall it, I still use Dr. Hammer's maps to look things up. But the story that's going on with cortex-related issues is, first of all, the most complex and very important to get the handedness and actually the hormonal status right. And it's mainly about your situation in the pack. If you think of a pack of wolves, so whether you are the leader or so territorial. The conflict content quite often is territorial or of a sexual kind, and then of course the corresponding organs related to it. So that is your now the fourth biological law. Right. Those are the different germ layers that we mentioned. And what Dr. Hammer found, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think, and also probably most controversial, is that our microbes and fungi, and he redefined virus a little bit, and that is, of course, nowadays one of the hottest topics, probably. But let's just focus on the bacteria, mycobacteria, fungi are actually our oldest biological helpers. So when I spoke about cell minus or decrease in function, like I mentioned with the skin, or whether in the first phase is a cell plus, so a swelling, so a cell plus. I'll talk about it in a moment. About you hear my husky, sexy voice here. That is always related to a very old conflict that I need to book a session with you on, actually, Debbie, to finally resolve it. Because every time I prepare a presentation like this, I go into my old story with a cough. And the conflict shock was me as a 5-6-year-old child walking into my dad's department that he was managing. And that was a galvanizing company he was managing. And I wasn't supposed to go through a door. I also had a cast on my leg. I had a broken leg at the time. And I walked through the forbidden door and fell into an open manhole, which is why I wasn't supposed to walk through there. And in galvanizing, I don't know whether anyone is familiar with galvanizing. There's all sorts of solvents and acid and stuff that you use in the process. So seeing that I'm here, of course, I didn't fall into the cyanide or whatever that was in the manhole. And I still don't know really how I got myself out of that. I just know I pulled put my elbows out, and that's why I didn't fall in, and then somehow crawled out, fainted for a moment, and then you winded yourself. And so when I came to, very shortly after, what I did was this huge big breath. So my lungs are of course a survival organ, into shock, into fear of death, conflict shock, especially as a small person who doesn't really know what's going on, can't explain it away because you haven't got that cognitive ability yet. And what your beautiful psyche, organ, mind, brain does then is increase cell mass on your lung bronchi, on your lung alveoli, so you get more oxygen into the system. And once that conflict is resolved, once the organism understands I survived, breathing normalizes, then this extra conflict mass that's been built up is being taken away or healed away, or whichever way you want to call it, by a tubercle bacillus, actually, so the TB. And so that is very lucky if you've got some of that left. Otherwise, what you'll find in your lungs is a sort of encapsulation, which, depending on X-ray or scan at some point that you do, maybe in connection with a cough, would come up as a shadow, and maybe, depending on another conflict shock the doctor tells you, could be then diagnosed as a cancer or cancerous growth or whatever. But if you've got, excuse me, if you still have your old mycobacteria, tubercle bacteria, then it gets eaten away, sputum, coughing, and then that's it. So, but of course, then I didn't know this. I only learned this when like Debbie said at the beginning, I learned about back then medicine before I learned about German medicine, and only slowly made that connection of this recurring cough. And again, it still obviously serves a purpose, and it keeps coming back. And every time I do a presentation, I just obviously think about it. Change in temperature, change in extreme smells or fragrances also still do it. And I just have to collapse one by one, obviously through EFT tapping or whatever. So that is then your brainstem, lungs, and a little bit of medulla, your bronchi, and there you have a lifelong cough. So yeah, and what Hammer, of course, the word virus, again, you'll see people talking about proteins now, whichever way you want to call it. There is, of course, Dr. Sam Bailey here in New Zealand, and her husband, who came up with the book Virus Mania, and a virus doesn't exist at all, and different theories. I just would like to invite you to just go look into the matter, read up about it, and then form your own opinion. In which whatever presents as a virus or this peptide or protein is useful in, like I said before, in the outermost layer, so the ectoderm, which connects to your cortex, and the relevant problems that come to, like I said, with the skin, you need some sort of protein or something to actually fill up the mass that had been taken away. So again, that's just up to you what you want to make of virus mania or not. And then coming to sorry, I'm speeding through this quite a bit, but I think, how are we doing for time? Yeah, we're good. So the fifth biological law, and I do like this a lot. If medicine, as we have known it since the Flexner report, if medicine were absolutely 100% correct, then in a excuse me, in a room full of people, or an assembly of, I don't know, 50 people in a meeting, and somebody gets sick or shows up with symptoms, if it were correct, what we so far have thought being the case, then everybody would walk away with similar symptoms. And if you go far enough back and in the German new medicine, the Canadian side, there's quite a bit of really long history going back to the plague and the different explanations they have, or also, of course, the Spanish flu and all the details. So again, it's up to the individual what to believe or not. I do believe that the body doesn't make a mistake. Personally, I haven't really put a firm belief around what we have been going through in the last 5 years, whether that is something completely unknown or what it is. But we can always address the symptoms by applying this model. Again, the 5 biological laws don't apply for in the case of accidents or being poisoned in some way of shape or form. And of course, there's quite high levels of toxicity now around. So again, part of it you can support. The medical model comes, and also quite a lot of natural or alternative modalities come up with the idea of an immune system and strengthening the immune system. And I'm definitely all for that. I work as a health consultant in the health store a couple of days a week, and I just feel that it feels right for me that all of the above applies. And as long as the person gets back on their legs and happy and content and healthy, then that's fine. And if not, if there is a chronicity and nothing works, then we go deep and actually maybe apply the 5 laws that we talk about here. So the 5th law is basically that every disease is a significant biological special program, and nature has created it to actually assist an organism. And one very good example for this would be scars. If you have scars that don't heal, in my world or this world, I almost certainly know that there is still some trauma left. There's still something unhealed. And what your organism does is create a thicker skin layer, just so this area that, let's say you have by mistake dropped a knife from your kitchen bench, and it obviously penetrated your skin and your sub layer, and then your organism creates this thicker scar tissue, and that is simply because you haven't completely understood as a whole organism that this was a singular case. You're not going to drop knives, on your feet every day from now on. But once you actually go into the process and literally talk to your organism and to your mind and your whole organism and say, okay, this was a one-off, it's not going to happen again, and truly believe that also, and maybe take measures that it doesn't happen again. Maybe tell yourself, okay, I'm going to wear protective shoes now in the kitchen so it doesn't happen. And then the reactions will follow, your organism will follow, and the scar underneath your outer skin layer will go away. Thin at first, thin out, and then go away. So, and of course, where we know this is, as a species, we wouldn't have evolved if these 5 biological laws were not correct. We have evolved, we have biologically evolved. We developed, for example, an auditory digital, so a self-thinking internal thought process in our brain. We developed language at some point, we didn't have that, and so on and so on. And I suppose your group with the conscious awakening is aware that we are in the middle of another big leap in evolution, and I hope that we can apply some of what these biological laws bring about. Let me see what I've got the next slide. Yeah, I was thinking of some celebrity stories. Let me just get some tea, sorry. There was a movie out a few years ago now, King George and his stutter. I don't know if people recall that. And if you remember uh, how the father stood behind the son, screaming at him, really abusing him, while he was trying to learn. So the stutter became the symptoms as a meaningful process. There was a shock, the vocal cords, the larynx, everything reacted to it. And of course, as we know later in life, he resolved that. As a beautiful story also in the world of Tony Robbins, for people who are familiar with Tony Robbins, where he actually worked with a young man, I think in his 30s, who had a lifelong stutter so far, and resolved that conflict, which was a little bit tricky because he was very young when he developed a stutter at the time of learning to speak as well. And yeah, so the other one was, I think it was Ray Charles. Maybe help me out here, Debbie. Was it Ray Charles who observed his brother drowning in a wooden tub, just a small wooden tub while they were playing, and then he developed an eye infection and became blind, and so obviously didn't know, he wasn't sitting with us in this presentation tonight. Otherwise, he could have maybe understood why this, witnessing, seeing, so through his visual sense, perceiving something that was unexpected, dramatic. He was by himself, of course, felt really, really guilty, and had absolutely no strategies till the very end. Otherwise, his eye infection would have healed up. I would assume, and it wouldn't have gotten lifelong blindness. So maybe in our Q&A, yeah, so that would be that. Maybe in our Q&A we can get into people's cases a little bit, not in too much depth because it requires a lot of work. But maybe we all know cases of maybe celebrities, of mental or physical symptoms that they had. There's a very cool Telegram page that he's just actually started to put English translations, but he looked into Andy Warhol and his hoarding, crazy hoarding that he had, to the point that nobody could walk anymore in his place once they needed to empty it. And so he goes into the mental conflict shocks there. And yeah, so once you get the model a little bit under your belt, the 5 biological natural laws, then many things will take on a different meaning. And so yeah, so we'll leave it at that maybe so far. Again, in the Q&A, maybe we can just go to this next slide. Up to you, Debbie. On to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. That's refreshing my memory from when I trained with you all those years ago. And would you like to stop sharing your screen? There you go.
There you
All
go.
done. All done. And say from my own perspective, certainly made light work of what eventually people dive right into it as a very complex. It's not a modality, is it? It's more like a diagnostic tool, for want of a better word.
Yeah, it's. I think I always think it's. I consider that's why the name meta medicine or meta health at the time resonated really well with me, because it kind of forms an umbrella over all other modalities. It is. I think it's a roadmap. I'm not so sure about diagnostic tool. It depends what you want to call it. For me, it's a beautiful scientific map that, as opposed to Louise Hay or, like I said, Everett Rose, where it goes, you've got a sore throat and or you've got an earache, and what did you not want to hear? Yes, yes, but there are so many layers. There's so many different parts to each organ, and each organ has its functionality, and we may as well really become aware of the functionality of our organs, our skin, our digits, our feet, our heart, vagus nerve, and all that, and actually work with it. And again, what I like most is that, to a very large extent, the fear of disease just goes.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And if I could just back up what you've been saying with some of my own experiences, if that's okay, just to help our group understand some things. Please correct me if I've got this wrong. But during one thing that got me very interested in, are we calling it meta medicine, Germany medicine? What are we calling it?
Just call it the five biological
The five
laws.
biological
Yeah,
laws.
yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, what got me interested in that was when I first heard about the UDIN, unexpected, dramatic, isolating, and no strategy. Makes perfect sense. And all four needs to be applicable. Is that correct? In order for that to happen in the body. So, from again, my personal perspective, my mother had pancreatic cancer, and I understand the conflict of that to be like a separation, sorry, a starvation existence. And so she was in the war. And so, of course, there was all of that that was going on, everything to do with the war. And the resolution, I feel, would have been when she went into a care home. And so she was no longer in that starvation existence. That's the way that I perceived it, just to give some thoughts away how people might be able to interpret what you're saying. And for myself, I had kidney issues when I was younger, not long after I was born. And my dad left when I was 1 year old. And so that the abandonment is said to be linked with kidney issues. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that was my understanding. And that made perfect sense to me. And I also worked with a client who had eczema, and that was triggered by his daughter, who was in New Zealand, up in Auckland somewhere. And his daughter went to the South Island for college. And every time she came home, the eczema flared up. So we worked with that. So I triggered
Yes,
it and, calmed it down within the session.
yes, very good.
And also with my grandson, exactly what you said about children. He would stay with us. He still stays with us a lot. But every time he went home, his eczema flared up, and daughter was saying, "What soap powder are you using? What are you doing?" I go, "Well, it's actually not that. It's because he's in the healing phase now of going home." So
Yeah.
I hope that just gives a little more context on, a very complex topic. And yes, I take that more now as the umbrella rather than the diagnostic. Diagnostic was the wrong term. As the umbrella over things. But once you know this, it can simplify so much that's going on in your body. It really can.
It's just nice to be good friends with your body. It's just a nice way to live. I was giving a workshop a couple of weeks ago on strategies for stress and anxiety, and this whole vocabulary that we apply to disease or anxiety also, we have to fight it and we have to combat it and we have to win the war against cancer and all this stuff. It's just such a hostile environment, which puts actually further stress into our body, mind, soul system. So very well done, Debbie, with applying it like that. And with the and there's no such thing as a wrong approach. Like in where I work alongside a couple of naturopaths. So with eczema, yes, there heal the gut, repair the gut microbiome with a good probiotic and a specific probiotic responsible for skin. Make sure that your zinc levels are right because you need that for your skin integrity. And there's no wrong and only this approach. Like, but if it is a reoccurrence, and of course it's a good idea to stay as natural as possible and not have all kind of perfumed laundry stuff and whatever. But yeah, we're on to something fantastic with our approach here, Debbie.
Absolutely. I think all people who work in the healing field should know about the five natural laws.
Very, again, coming to the healing crisis, and where it is important for people. I remember a friend of mine, a lovely lady here in the community, elderly lady. She had a very well managed leukemia. Leukemia, such as is an interesting story, is the healing phase of some sort. And then finally gave in and attended a workshop, and I'm not going to go into the details of the modality, but she got herself into a healing crisis. And because nobody in that workshop environment knew what we know, she then, the healing crisis became just emaciated her body and it became uncontrollable. Then, of course, for such kind of healing, you need an extraordinary amount of protein. Same with cancer. And all of this, nobody around her knew, and she passed away, which is, death is part of life, let's just say. But it still resonates. I still think back of all those healers that were present and participating in the workshop, and not knowing about this healing crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll open it up to whoever may like to ask a question. I would ask you to do the usual raise your hand.
There's a
And
couple of things in the chat there, Debbie.
right, let me have a look in the chat. Can you see the chat, Barbara?
Let me have a look.
Okay, somebody put the virus, Andy's very good at this sort of thing. He put the Virus Mania book,
Yes,
link to that, and you can heal your life with Louise Hay.
Yeah.
But people can put something in the chat if you don't want to raise your hand, and I will read that out for Barbara as well.
Thank you, Andy, for being such a superstar here.
And I'm sure you've all got lots of questions to ask.
I've got a little game here before the hands all go up.
Yes.
So if somebody shows up in your healing clinic, and they come in and you shake hands or give them a hug, and you can feel by touching them that they are clammy, cold. They seem really restless, and they tell you, "Man, I haven't slept for a week or so." Which phase of the two phases are they in?
Are you asking the group or myself?
Whoever wants to give it a go. If you remember the two phases of the disease, one being the stress phase and the cold phase, and the second one is the warm phase, the parasympathetic response.
If anybody wants to comment or raise a hand on that one?
Otherwise, just go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, if I can remember. It would be the second phase.
Cold?
No, the
No.
warm. The warm.
So when the person
Yeah.
comes in with cold hands and erratic, they would be in the cold phase.
Yeah, the
In
second
the stress
phase, the
phase.
warm phase.
The first phase, the stress phase, the cold phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was reading and not
Which
fully
is,
concentrating. And
yeah, I'm
you're
just,
going to talk about the handedness as well, whether they are right or left-handed.
yes, I was just looking at the chat, sorry. Yes, so I don't know whether when I was in the middle of the presentation, I couldn't see what you were doing, but if, like, I only discovered, so in 2009, I organized with from my friend in the South Island, I organized one of the, then it was called Medicine trainers to, he was then living in Canada, he's in France now, Richard Fluke, and that's how we created the first training here in New Zealand. So we were a small group, 10 people. We hired a beautiful big batch down in North Canterbury, and spent, I don't know, 10 days or so together learning, the very basics, let's say. Yeah, so that is, and when he did a little case study with me in front of the others, and that's where I noticed that I'm actually left wired. So probably as a child, as soon as I grabbed, old styled parenting, as I grabbed my pen to write, probably with my left hand, my mother probably would have said, just put it in your good hand, Barbara, and would have retrained it. It fortunately didn't cause too much damage apart from being a little bit loopy maybe. But but it can lead, again, it can lead to all sorts of heart issues. It can lead to stutter, to all sorts of things. But anyway, finally I discovered I was left wired, and my whole world and everything made actually started to make sense. Up to then I was just looking at Louise Hay, and then a lot of other modalities now talk about the right hand or left hand, and it's not as simple as that. You've got to know how your wiring is, whether you're left or right wired.
So let's see what everybody is. So when you clap your hands, is your right hand on top or is your left hand on top? You might clap like that, and then one hand will move. Is that correct, Barbara? And the other will stay still.
Yeah. Or even
But which one?
if you want to rest your hands, in your lap or whatever, one side will feel more comfortable than the other if you're still not sure from that.
What are you doing there, Andy? I can see your hands in a certain way. Which hand is on top?
Lefty.
Oh yeah,
Okay. And then
definitely.
Barbara will explain what that means.
Yes. So your dominant hand, in your case, and it's left. In my case, it's also left. Is your outer world. So your male side, father, brother issues, excuse me, brother, partner, male partner, business, if you consider it as, running it like with a male drive. Very, very tricky when women get into menopause and they have been running their life in this male perspective with that dominant side, it gets into terrible trouble in the menopause time. So that is your dominant hand. So in our case, it's left. And then you have your non-dominant hand, I would just call it. That is your inner world. If you think women sitting together, making sure that the fire stays warm, chatting, interacting with others, a lot of oxytocin being built, helping, supporting your female side, your mother, your daughter, your sister. So those would be, where you can find the issues then. Was that answering the question?
And then with the right hand dominant?
Yeah, the same. So if your left hand is dominant, that's your dominant side. If your right hand is your dominant side, then that's your dominant side.
And that relates to the female.
No, the right. If you're right-handed,
yeah.
Yeah. So if you're right-handed, are you right-handed, David?
Yes.
So your right hand is your dominant side. That's your male side, your outer world, your
That's right. Yes.
So forget left or right. Just
Yes,
dominant hand and non-dominant hand. Non-dominant is inner world. Dominant hand is outer world. Male and female. Mm.
So metamedicine, more the right on the male side, if you will, and the left on the female. Right female, left male. Just for ease.
That depends what
which way you're wired. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So like Andy and I, when we're left-handed, that's your dominant hand. So the left is my male father, brother, male, the outer world. And my non-dominant hand is my right hand. It will be the opposite way for you. And that's your inner world and sister, female. Yeah.
Just on that, the inner world, is that like if I'm governed by female for inner, is that including the spiritual side?
That is such a very good question.
Because even though I'm left-handed, I don't have any traits, well, not that I know of from my father, but I have a mixture of both. Well, I'm pretty much, I'd say I'm female dominant in the way of emotions, responses, behaviors, and things like that. I'm largely lean more feminine than male, even though I can be staunchly masculine. But my inner world is, I would say, is definitely female, leaning, not totally, but certainly dominant. But only the emotional side and understanding. I'll talk to people at parties, and we'll be out in the kitchen over the teacups having it talks about periods and tampons and things like that. It's just the things that normal men wouldn't do. So that's why I believe I'm largely wired feminine, well, feminine dominant in the internal world. And I'm wondering if I'm left-handed and maybe have learned some of the stuff from my father, how?
Well, there's where this is, I mean, then we go into brain hemispheres as well, right? So you have your, let's say for a right-handed person, your left brain hemisphere would be the logical side, where you do calculus, where you reason, all the logical. That's also where you do anxiety, by the way, and then in the right hemisphere of a right-handed person will be the creativity, the curiosity, the inventor, the poetic side. That's also connected, according to Jill Boulter Taylor, who had a stroke in her left hemisphere and only lived in her right for 8 years or so. And she had this connectedness to everything and everybody, this vastness, fantastic. I don't know if you ever haven't seen it. My Stroke of Insight is a fantastic talk, I think a TED talk even. So where it is relevant, your question, Andy, is when you have a so-called disease, when you have symptoms, then it becomes relevant insofar as who triggered the conflict shock. You know, how did you perceive it? And I'll give you an example of, again, coming to eczema, where, and that's ages ago, I worked with someone, and that was a very strange eczema on the back. And throughout this person's life, they were convinced that the conflict shock was losing their mother very young, when the child was very young. However, because of the way the eczema developed and on which side and the handedness and all that, we actually found that what was most unique and dramatic for this child, a male child, was actually through the death of the mother, the father got really depressed and didn't give the boy as much attention anymore. So they had a little routine with the little boy sitting on the father's lap, the father rubbing the back, and telling stories or reading books together, whatever. And this is why it's important that also the psyche, of course, gets impacted. Once the mother died, the father retreated in himself. That contact was lost, and throughout this person's life, whenever there was something going on with the relationship, then the eczema would actually flare up, in chronicity. So that's where it becomes relevant. And also in the questioning. So when, like I said before, somebody comes in with cold hands and said, "I'm completely erratic," and and then since the last few days, I just had this terrible pain in my lower back or whatever. So then to actually determine what happened is the question you would ask. So what happened, let's say 3 days ago, it's the lower back, it's on the right side, and because the person is right-handed, let's say, then you can ask, so the conflict shock would have to do with your male partner, or that can also be a business partner, or your husband, your son, or your father, that you experienced dramatic, you just couldn't believe what you were seeing or hearing or feeling, and you had no strategies. And that's where the handedness comes in. If that makes sense.
Yeah. We'll just go to a question here by Judith N. She's written in the comments. What would you say about an illness brought on by stress that has not healed and was also genetic?
Very fantastic question, and it is my passion really is trauma work. I worked in the Christchurch earthquakes using rather unusual strategies like the NLP trauma process or EMDR or EFT tapping, and we later received government contracts to work in the trauma recovery. And there is such a thing, of course, as a three-generational cellular memory passed on to the next generation. Mark Wolin, he founded the Family Constellation Group or the work actually in the USA, and he wrote a fantastic book. It didn't begin with you, or it didn't start with you. And that goes into intergenerational trauma. And my view and my experience is that yes, we all are multidimensional beings. This is the body. This is my embodiment this time around. This is where the symptoms are. And if I address it in this lifetime, it can also almost heal the past tense. Like some of the work I do is timeline therapy or hypnosis. And it literally, you can actually feel that somebody in the past needed to hear this and for the next generations to move on. And even if it's not so much happening in our lifetime, at least the cellular imprint gets healed, and it's not passed on to the next generation. And I really believe that what we're doing at the moment and these last few decades is exactly that, actually making sure that new trauma or old trauma is not passed on to the next generation. And I think that's one of the greatest things we can do. When I work one-on-one with clients, and I always want to know what is their outcome, what do they expect from sessions like this, and when they're done, I always say, so my goal is very simple. I'm in for world peace, and by working with me, you're going to be part of that team. And because I do believe once people heal and they address their shadows and they heal their inner child, whatever you want to call it, they are not going to push a button and run some nuclear bombs onto the next country. They're just not going to do that because they are too much in their compassion and humanity.
Absolutely right there, Barbara. Don't want to go too much more into this, but there's a little bit of confusion between somebody saying they're right or left-handed, but their other hand is on top. Can you
this is
clarify that?
I would assume, I mean, it's difficult with the person not being there with me. I would assume, like all my life, I'm a handball player, I'm a tennis player, squash, whatever. I've done everything with my right hand because because I was trained to use my right hand. Only later in life, like 2009, did I find out that my original wiring is actually left. So in the case of the person asking, it may just be something very similar. It's also, I mentioned menopause before, and again, that's all the very complex, and I don't want to generalize here and put any idea out there without being precise. But through menopause, we go through a hormonal change, and for some symptoms, this is quite specific. So then also handedness changes, let's just say, or the significance of the handedness. I hope that answers it a little bit.
Okay. So either way, what they're looking at with the conflict resolution is a way that they're handed rather than the way they write. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, the way they're wired. So
Yes.
whichever hand is on top is where the conflict will be within their body.
And that side of your body also, that's where symptoms show up. So it is your left ankle, or it is my left shoulder, or whatever. Then I know, for me, being my dominant hand here, my left hand, that the conflict will have to do with the outer world, male, father, son, whatever, male side. For me, my dominant side, a right wired person will be their male side.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tricky, but you get it. You'll get it at some point. It just clicks.
Yeah.
Especially once you manage to make the connection to the actual symptoms.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've known numerous people say, well, it's always on my left side or it's always on my right side.
Mm,
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. A lot.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Ray, you'd like to ask a question?
Hi there. Although I missed the initial part, I was driving. I hope I will get the recording later. Um, it's really, really good. And interestingly, I have been thinking for so many months and weeks, like whenever we sit, most of the time, like people are sitting, putting their right side leg up, and at times I question myself body language, why this feels so comfortable, or is this a state of being relaxed, or there is something our brain is working faster, that's why we are uneasy. Because I generally see there are other people who are sitting both legs down comfortable, and I feel urge of crossing my leg. And similarly, while sleeping, in the beginning, I feel bringing my red leg up. Like, we just do that cross legs while sleeping, just one leg is up for a while. So, what exactly is that on the leg side, red leg? And I'm a right handed, by the way. And also, then I will ask my other question later, probably, if I have chance. That why right? Because my right ear has been all right from my teenage, has been always off and on affected. Then injuries are also always on the right side. So I missed the part. What exactly is on that? I got two questions actually. These two questions are mixed up. So the first question was about leg.
So with the leg, I actually wouldn't know whether that is the same as the handedness. What I could imagine that it is, I would actually go into more of hip situation, like people. I wrote about natural childbirth the other day in my blog, and the importance of it, and the consequences of interventions and everything. So, and a lot of stress, or a lot of even birth stress, is actually stored in the hip, in the psoas muscle, and quite often to relax and actually relieve a little bit of that stress is where we may cross over. Also, crossing over, people do it so the brain hemispheres cross over. So one of the anxiety strategies that I was teaching in that workshop is actually finding ways of crossing over. So bilateral stimulation, I call it, and that is literally getting out of one part of the mind where anxiety going to a curiosity spiral and actually connect the brain hemispheres. So sitting, you see, that's like when I'm in a full brain learning state, in a webinar, for example, or in a seminar room, like I'm even now, I cross over my legs, and that's just simply, I think it is just so my brain works properly. So, but you had a second question, right, as well. Oh, your symptoms always been on the right side. And you're a right-handed woman, right? We said.
Yes.
So, without going too much into any hormonal change or anything, if it's always been happening on your right side as a right-handed person or woman, then it will have to do with the male, with the outer world, business, father, brother, son, male partner, anything male and outer world. So that's where the conflict shocks will have happened related to your symptoms.
That's really interesting because I'm a whole and soul parent. Not partner, no partner. My father is gone, and my brothers. I feel I have two daughters, by the way. So I do not have any direct or any like active male father or brother or like any figure in my life. And I don't feel I have any issues with any leftover like that. So that's what it surprises me. Then what is left? What is there? Why it is coming like this still?
So the right side can also, again, it's your outer world, right? It's your
Okay.
it's your outer world. So that can also very much, especially as a soul mother, can be the way you're the breadwinner or the business. Uh, if any conflicts happen there at work, or that can also be related to that. It's not so you ask the left side. Again, that's your inner world, your female mother, sister, daughter,
Mm.
inner world. And then even your pet, if it's like your baby, or or if you've got a little business or a big business and you consider it not from a male perspective, but you want to just hug it. So if you lose your business or you have to close it down, it's like losing a child. That is all the left side. Right?
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Anyone else has any other questions? I know this can seem like quite a complex topic. It does take some getting your head around, but again, just to reiterate, whether you're right or left-handed isn't the same as being right or left-wired.
Yeah. Also, I think, let me check in the chat. I think Andy put the book there. There is for those of you who watch television or computer, Netflix, there is a fantastic, I think it's actually a series, plays in Turkey. It's beautiful cinematography and wonderful people. And I think the title of the movie series is Another Self, Another Me or Another Self. And that is all about family constellation work and the impact it has on the different generations. Remember, we've all gone through war and starvation, you mentioned before, Debbie, and abandonment, and the different issue. And I think family constellation work is a beautiful way to work, actually. But yes, if you need a binge, just go and watch that Netflix series, Another Self, Another Me. Yeah,
Beautiful,
really.
thank you.
I think it's 3 or 4 friends, ladies. One of them being a surgeon, actually, and the impact previous trauma have and how they solve it. It's really quite beautiful.
Wonderful. We'll take a look at that. Sherry.
I was born in the era where when you went to school, if you were left-handed, you were changed to the right. And that's what happened to me. And I seem to be able to change okay. Whereas I had a friend who started school about the same time as me. She's a difference about 5 days in being born. So we had birthdays fairly close. And she had a terrible time changing to the right hand. But about 5 years ago, I decided to, because I really wasn't ambidextrous, but 5 years ago, I decided to use my left hand more. And I use it for quite a few things. And I find sometimes I just lead with the left hand, sometimes I lead with the right.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, interesting. And I just always find it interesting how uh, changing in that way, the different, how it impacts, like I said, like the Yudin moment, it impacts your psyche, your brain, and your organ. Creating a change like that, there will have been a reason why you started to feel more comfortable trying to use the left hand more. And that is always what I always find, what I find fascinating.
Mm. Yeah. And although I found any illnesses have been more right-handed, but if I have a pain, it's on the left hip. Always the left, never ever the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
something I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And when I lived in Australia, I just had a hell of a time. Great deal of pain. But since I've been living back in New Zealand, it just completely disappeared. It'll be there, but it's just completely disappeared. No
Interesting.
symptoms whatsoever. Or occasionally a little nodule on the hand or
Yeah.
you know, a bit of an ache in the wrist or something like that, but it just completely disappeared. And whereas in Australia, I was taking all the natural therapies,
Yeah.
and then I just decided to stop them. And it wasn't for pain when I did stop them; it just it was lack of, you know, the ability to get the natural preparations I was on. Really, that's the reason I stopped.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I see at my work, I see so many people having all these surgeries, like knee replacements, hip replacements, and it's for me, it's always quite amazing. That happened to me myself as well in a few years ago, where suddenly my hip started to hurt, and again, even though I've been doing this work and thinking that way for so long, the first connection I made then was that I changed cars. After 13 years, I had a different car and twisted in a very funny way getting in and out of the car. So I changed that. But of course, then at some point when I was more relaxed about it all, I went into this 5 biological law thinking and came to a complete different conclusion. So I'm still in in the healing phase of that. But yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So when you're speaking about the healing phase as well, Barbara, it's you said if somebody's had a shock for a day, then they get sick for a day. So the shock, the Yudin moment or the effects on the body can last for quite some time.
It can last for a very long time, and then it becomes tricky because you don't want, and that's one way that we have a different approach to originally Dr. Harmer was doing. You know, that if you had an ongoing conflict, let's say that lasted years, right? Then okay, you can still decide that you want years to heal. But if you don't, then we have to just allow ourselves to actually apply different modalities to shorten the whole healing process. And have this awareness that probably still on and off there will be symptoms for the same amount of a time that the first phase lasted. Doesn't happen quite often. Usually what happens is it's more of a chronicity. You know, so part resolution, like you said, you know, all 4 of you then unexpected dramatic. So if you then share it with a friend, so it's not all 4 items anymore. And so that also goes into the second phase, but it's not the reversal of the conflict. It's not the complete understanding and healing of the actual conflict. And then that can become a chronic disease, if you want. It's very interesting. Again, coming back to natural childbirth, we would naturally be much more resilient and not experience this as a big conflict mass if we are born in a natural way and have an in-arm experience, I call it, during our first years in childhood, continuum concept I talk about. Then we have a natural resilience. So next to us, And we all know people like that. They're just, they're highly emotionally intelligent, but they're just not phased like some people are. They're not as dramatic. And the same thing happens to them as to others. And again, I believe that we can heal this life. We can heal this. Yeah.
So if we just briefly talk somewhat simplistically, if I can use that word. So if somebody has a headache, for example, would they be looking at some sort of conflict that had gone on before, let's say migraine, some sort of conflict that had gone on before that migraine happened?
It is really quite tricky head-wise. I just would always connect to the. Do you remember in the workshop manual? I put that in there. To the brain areas. You know how Dr. Hammer mapped all the different brain areas. So you have your old brainstem, and the different areas connected to the organ. And quite often, when you get into the healing of the organ connected to that part of the brain, then maybe some swelling can occur. You mentioned kidneys before. Maybe, yeah, that's a different process altogether. But that is how I see headaches. So there's something else happening in an organ, and but yeah, would be. We don't have the time to go into all these details or any such details here. But again, I would always look at the general. Where's the person at? Their handedness. Are they more? Are they cold or warm? Are they in more of an erratic state? So, which means they would be in the first phase, or are they in the second phase, and then take it from there. It is really detective work. It is literally having the map and having all your tools there, going into details, and actually, I always draw a diagram. So, okay, so this is how you show up. These are the symptoms. So you must be in the healing phase, the healing crisis of the second phase. And then, okay, so what happens? Just go back a couple of days. And then you can ask, okay, so what happened, let's say 6 days ago that was unexpected, dramatic, and so on and so on.
Thank you. I know it's not easy to give simple answers, but do what we can.
We do what we can. We do what we can.
Karen.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Barbara. This is a fascinating talk. Excuse
Hi,
my
Karen.
voice tonight. I'm full of head cold, so I guess I'm going through something at the moment. Now, I'm the third generation in my family that I'm aware of that has got exactly the same chronic illness. And I'm trying to do something about it to reverse it, and I am actually succeeding with that. But what does it mean? Why do we all have the same thing?
Yeah. Oh, I don't really have one answer to that. There's, of course, in the medical world, they would talk about inherited, genetics, and if you imagine, like, I don't know whether that happens in your work as well, Debbie, but like some of the worst phobias I've seen, let's say somebody has a cat or dog phobia, it's not actually something that happened to them, but their mother had that phobia, and the mother is kind of dealing with it, but it comes on so strong in the daughter just because mother and daughter were close, you learn, like as a little child, you mirror. You have your role model and your mirror. With your mirror neurons, you mirror everything that your parent does. Quite close, usually the mother, but both parents. And with that learning comes your behavior, and with the behavior comes also your reaction, what stresses you, what doesn't stress you. And out of that come your organ reaction, you know? So, yeah, that's how I would see it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Yeah, it also really depends on what it is, but it does really, maybe it is an idea, if you go and work with somebody who does still, full-time practice German new medicine, or maybe do a proper training. I would always recommend people to go onto the learninggnm.com website. We put it in the link somehow. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. Does the chat get recorded?
Yes, I think it does. But Andy, are you able to take all those links as well? And then we can put them in the Telegram channel? Thank you.
So learning
Brilliant.
I can't, my computer is too far away now.
Tell Andy and he'll find it for you.
It's learning, all in one word, learninggnm, which stands for German New Medicine.com. And
Yeah, it's interesting too. You brought up Dr. Sam Bailey earlier and the interesting theories on viruses, or that viruses don't exist. I've actually been to her husband's talking about the same thing.
Mark, nice.
Yeah, Mark, yeah, amazing family. So they're local to where I live. And yeah, it's fascinating. So apparently this head cold I have at the moment, I don't have a virus. It's just a detox. Just look at it that way,
Yeah.
just detoxing.
It's interesting. I mean, some people are just so good and so informed that they can tell with their little child whether it is, snotty nose, which nostril it comes out, and whether it is green or just clear or whatever. They can tell whether the child is in an abusive home or whether they had some conflicts happening at a childcare center or something. It is really, once you get into the details, which I'm not always at the moment, because again, it just requires 24/7 to work with that, and yeah. Anyway, different story. So when you say she's in the area, my whole family is in the Canterbury area, and next time I'm down there, I will try and get hold of Sam Bailey, actually, because they live out in, where are you, Karen?
I'm in Christchurch.
Okay, nice. Interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to pick up on what you've said as well, Karen, and also for Barbara, I had a client many years ago who had breast cancer. And I use the 5 natural laws very, very loosely. I don't do a lot of deep work within that. I mean, I only had a couple of days training or so with you, so it's only quite superficial. So I don't have that depth of knowledge. Although I have listened to Richard Fluke and Carl Dawson, all of their talks and videos years ago. And so I asked her if she'd ever lost a child. And she said no, but she had been asked that before. And she had one of my quantum holographic healings, and that went to a past life where in this past life, she did lose a child. But then this is a bit quirky, but the healing from that happened when her granddaughter, when that child came back as her granddaughter in this life. And when her granddaughter was the age of the child that she lost in a past life, that's when the cancer happened.
Super interesting.
Just blew my mind completely.
Yeah.
completely. And I
Yeah.
did a YouTube on that one. But that just made me think about what you said, Karen, about the ancestral from a past life point of view. Look back and see what happened in that ancestral life. Sorry, not past life. What happened in that ancestral life and work with the clearing there. And the way that we know the quantum world works, that should have an effect on you and everyone thereafter and before.
It's fascinating, and this is where Mark Rolin's book, it didn't start with you. Andy put that in the link in the chat. He goes, and this is where the Netflix film that I mentioned also is interesting. He goes and actually one of the stories in the book I just briefly mentioned. So married couple sit together at breakfast, and out of the blue, the wife just has this energetic shift, and she feels cold, and totally dispute. She just totally thinks. She gets up and she says, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Really out of the blue at breakfast, and then it turns out that her great grandfather lived in Ireland, and he was a linesman, so electricity lines, and he had to check the electricity lines. It was a cold winter, a lot of snow and blizzard, and he fell and froze. And she was at exactly that age, like you just said, that age when the grandfather died, and so this freezing thing happened. It's just so fascinating. One of my clients, that when I was still living down south, couldn't have children, and we did some earthquake trauma work, and then she had sessions left over because the government paid for 4 sessions. Thank you very much. And she said, I wonder whether we could use the sessions to actually find out why I never had children. And she went onto her grandmother's timeline, and the grandmother was in Italy, was a jewelry maker, and then became pregnant, wedlock kind of, no husband. And the family was so ashamed and found that so terrible, they put her on a boat and sent her to New Zealand. And without it ever, and this is where the quantum world comes in, without it ever being officially spoken, the grandmother always had, this mindset. If you fall pregnant, you lose what's really important, what's your passion in life. And so there was this series of infertility in the family, just super, super interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole other world. But it came into play with the 5 natural laws, if you will, from that point of view. So I just found it really fascinating. So that was the child that she had lost in the previous life, was a child she had lost.
Very cool.
That came back. I was like, wow.
Yeah. And it didn't, so it must have been. So breast cancer is very interesting. The first thing I always ask, and most doctors don't tell you, I sent somebody back to a clinic in Christchurch actually to find out whether it was a ductal cancer or a glandular breast cancer, because it's 2 completely different stories. One is a brutal separation conflict, like losing a child, or baby pet, and glandular is a conflict of a constant worry conflict, and one is a different. There are different brain layers and different reactions, and how we said before, one is a cell minus in the first phase and the other one in the second phase, but possible to address, that's for sure. But you're in mastery level there, Debbie, going into past lives. Then
that's my modality that's come through over the years. That's something very different. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Very different. Yeah, I haven't mastered all the basics of 5 natural laws, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I see Andy put the learning German new medicine in there, in the chat.
Mhm.
And when you could we, if I'm okay to finish off soon, could I
Absolutely.
just share my screen, because I opened the German New Medicine website before, and I just want people to get a feel of what it looks like. Can I do
Wonderful.
that?
Absolutely. And then we'd like to know how to get in touch with you.
So when you get to the website, it looks like this, and you actually go back one step. Yeah, so this is what opens when you type in the learninggnm.com, and then you enter here. It changes around quite a bit. Caroline, I think she's quite active. So that's her website there. And this is a picture of Dr. Hammer, obviously. And then in the menu, I would recommend people who are interested in a bit more in-depth, or just, every now and then just go and have a little read here. And maybe start, if this is interesting at all, the study guideline or whatever. But start with the 5 biological laws that we just talked about. And then there are the biological special programs. And I'm just going to open, you mentioned brain before. So then it takes you into the color scheme is not my favorite, but it is like as it is, yellow, and orange and red, according to the different brain layers. But then you just scroll and it just tells you this is a brain map and the different areas, the organs corresponding to it. And then it goes into the next brain layer if it also, corresponds to that. And yeah, so not without, jumping to conclusion too fast, but it just gives you a chance to actually go into, and even if it's just confirming, oh wow, this is what I had, this was the disease or the symptoms that I had. Let's just see what does it say on this website. Again, it's super interesting, and go into the history as well. Biography. Yeah, and that's why I stopped sharing, just so people know what to expect when they go into this site. It's my favorite reference point, even though, my friend in Germany, Cora Klapp, she's the Meta Health master trainer. I would still love for her to come to New Zealand and actually organize a conference. Would be nice maybe to organize that in the beautiful winterless north. But yeah, but we'll have to just see. It's of course a lot to organize. But on their website, and I'm going to share that as well, the link later. There's a lot of very useful videos and articles. Again, it's always this rivalry going on, because on the German New Medicine website, you see this is all plagiarism, and all these people who have taken the work and ran away with it and whatever. I don't know. I always think it's like, we talk about psychology nowadays, and hardly anyone only uses Freudian psychology. We've all moved on to a newer way, and archetypal, Jung, and whatever. That's how I see it a little bit. It doesn't mean we don't honor or respect it, and I always want to honor Dr. Hammer. I really would have. I lived actually not far from where he worked. If I'd known, I would have maybe tried to meet him. Or, but yes, conflicts are unnecessary in this case, I think.
Mm. So with the site that you've sent a link to, thank you for that, Barbara. Do we have to register on
No?
that site? Anybody can access it.
Yeah, anybody can access. You
Lovely.
can see, you just where it says enter here, you just enter. And I hope they maintain it and keep it. There was a series of videos of a conference where Caroline actually was a presenter. She speaks with an even heavier German accent than I do. But she is very, very good. And I remember how fascinated I was by her presentation about heart, coronary artery, coronary vein issues and heart attacks and all that. Really, really fascinating. But I don't know. I haven't seen the videos. I don't know whether they're still there. I haven't checked lately.
No, thank you very much for a wonderful chat. And I think at least hopefully the basis people have received is that there is always a reason why things happen in the body. And it's just looking to find that reason. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the body keeps the score. I mean, this is you know, the body doesn't make a mistake, that's for sure.
That's right.
Again,
Yeah.
I reserve a little bit with all the new things appearing on the horizon and, you know, coronaviruses and all that. I'm not so sure whether that goes into category poisoning or whether we can deal with it as we would apply the 5 biological laws. But again, yeah, I'm hoping somebody will take all this, run away, and become New Zealand's expert on all this.
Well, we've got a few people online. Any volunteers? Don't look at me. I got enough on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how can people find you, Barbara, please?
At the moment, I haven't got my website up. I've got a business Google site. But best is to WhatsApp or to email.
Or Substack?
The Substack, yep. Do please subscribe to my Substack. So The Art of Living Well, which, which looks like the first slide that I showed you. The Art of Living Well, or with my name, Barbara Belger. Yeah, that's a good way.
Okay, because that's how I reconnected with you. I saw you on Substack.
Yeah, I saw you resonate. You're much more prolific on there. I'm working on the parenting article, and it's just so gooey. You know, it's such a big topic and such an important topic. And of course, now I've got grandchildren myself, and my sons are parents, and I've got to want to just get it absolutely right.
Yeah. Bite size, Barbara, bite size. Yeah.
and there's a lot of healing because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I did this so wrong when my children were little, and you know.
All for own learning. No, thank you so much, Barbara. Really, really appreciate that. I'm going to end the recording now. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.